I'm Andrew Strauss, and I'm the Dean of Faculty and Strategic Initiatives at Widener University School of Law in Wilmington, Delaware. Geoengineering is the attempt to manually override the Earth's thermostat, if you will, to counter the effects of global warming. Now, when most people think about that after a moment, it sounds like science fiction, something like out of some sort of Star Trek episode where they come across some dying planet and have to manipulate the planet to save it. It's not science fiction, though. It's a reality. It's where we're actually at today. It's being seriously discussed by scientists, by policymakers, and even by some environmentalists around the world. So what are we talking about specifically when we talk about geoengineering? What are the techniques? Well, some are clearly way beyond our technological capability now, or they're just way too expensive. Like people have talked about mining moon dust and putting it in geocentric orbit between the Earth and the Sun so as to reflect the Sun back into space and cool the Earth. Not likely to happen given present technology, or putting mirrors into outer space to do the same sorts of things. Other things that people have talked about probably wouldn't make much difference. They're benign, but they probably wouldn't matter much, like painting roofs white around the world to reflect the sun back into space. The two ideas, and this is out of maybe 45 ideas that have been floated that by my last count, the two ideas that seem to be getting the most traction are sulfur aerosol spraying and ocean iron fertilization. Sulfur aerosol spraying is spraying small sulfur particles into the stratosphere, high into the stratosphere, that themselves will reflect the sun back. This can be done at a fairly low cost. We're talking tens of billions of dollars, and it's fairly easy technologically. There's some things to be worked out, but it seems fairly easy to do. Could have all sorts of potential side effects, though, some of which we have a pretty good idea of, and some of which we don't know exactly what they could be. The other possibility when we talk about ocean iron fertilization is to put iron in iron-poor parts of the ocean, which will cause algae to bloom that feed on the iron. And the algae then absorbs the carbon, and eventually it winds up at the bottom of the ocean. If all this works, there's some question as to whether it can work that way. But that also can be done inexpensively and also has all sorts of potential side effects. So those are the major kinds of geoengineering that are being discussed today. Ethical dilemmas are considerable. For example, one of the big issues involved is, since the most likely technologies that we could use to alter climate change are also dangerous, the question comes up of whether some of us that use a tremendous amount of carbon have the right, instead of curtailing our use of carbon, have the right to then try and alter the climate and cause all sorts of problems, not only potentially for ourselves, but for other people who aren't using a lot of carbon. So that's one basic ethical dilemma. One thing that I think actually isn't an ethical dilemma, but is often pointed to by people who oppose geoengineering, is they say that even raising the issue possibly could cause us to continue to consume carbon, because it'll just be, we don't feel any urgency to stop consuming as much carbon as we are, returning the carbon to the atmosphere, because we can come up with a technological fix. I don't actually think that this is an issue any longer. We're already past the point of no return in terms of the amount of carbon we put into the environment. Now, don't get me wrong, we should try and restrict the amount we're putting in. The more we put in, the worse it's going to be. But we're already stuck with a situation that's going to be pretty bad. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that the Earth's temperature is going to go up anywhere between 1 and 6 degrees. We already have more carbon in the environment than we've had in 16 million years. So we're in for some pretty significant effects. And that's part of really why my co-editor, Will Burns, and I decided to go ahead with this project, is we felt like there is a lot of discussion within very small circles about geoengineering, but we felt that really there needs to be a lot more discussion, and the public in general needs to be brought on board, because there's significant governance issues involved. After all, who's going to decide whether we're going to pursue these types of of geoengineering projects, given their riskiness. Just as an example, a concrete example, the Maldives islands, South Pacific islands, are only about, on average, 1.5 meters above sea level. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says there's likely to be, or very possibly going to be, close to 1 meter rise in sea level over this century. The Maldives is already, 1/3 of the islands are already being flooded every year. If they and other small Pacific island countries decided that they wanted to embark on aerial spraying, could anyone tell them not to? What about the Indians? Possibly, one of the possible side effects of aerial spraying is it could shut down the South Asian monsoon that 1 billion Indians depend on to feed themselves, to irrigate their crops for water. And so there's some serious governance issues involved, and we need to start talking about those.